Well, it really is a pleasure to be here, and I guess continuing the theme of today's discussions that Sean Sands kicked off right at the start, everything is moving at such a rapid pace, and the last panel was talking about a lot of that change, and there was the question that Toby posed around, is there 3D food printing? Well, yes, there is, and it reminded me of a very famous quote that the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. And I think when you're here at a conference like this conference, you realise that the group of people that attend are actually the leading edge. They're the people that want to know what's over the horizon. So when you have your coffee breaks and you talk about the innovation that's been described, you're the ones more likely than not to be the early adopters of it. So congratulations to you for investing in your business, not just to keep it alive, but to take it forward. For the rest of the industry that isn't in these sorts of discussions, you do tend to worry about how they're going to address some of these mega trends that are going to come down the pipe at them at a great rate. And so that's why I think the conversation about the relationship between industry and research is so important. And I'm going to share with you some of the work that we've done, some research ourselves, looking at the role that ag tech plays in driving growth for agriculture in Australia. But first of all, some of those megatrends we talked about. Right, water scarcity was mentioned by Sean. Today we live in an environment where it takes 15,000 litres of water to produce 1 kilogram of beef. On average, it's 215 litres of water for 1 tomato, to come back to our sector. Consumers are not prepared to see that much of a scarce resource go into the traditional manufacturing of food. They are challenging us to think about different ways to produce some of those traditional products. So we're going to be dragged into this whether we like it or not, right? So we have to look for new science, new technology to help us farm and grow more efficiently, to help us get the produce we need for consumers in a more efficient way. Now, to do that, we need to really take stock, if I drive this properly, of what our market looks like right now. Where are we? So in 2016, KPMG partnered with Queensland Government and Startup Australia and CBA to take a look at 5 global markets that were really driving ag tech and look at the opportunity for Australia. Now, I just want to touch briefly on this slide as a snapshot. What it tells us is that our growth rate, our productivity growth rate in Australia is 1.4%. That's behind the global average of 1.7%. So the message here is, whilst this community of early adopters is probably working really hard on trying to bring new technology into their industry, on average, we're not moving fast enough to compete. So we really need to lift our game. It also tells us that we're an export industry of $43 billion, which is pretty good. But we have this aspirational target that the NFF talks about, and by 2030 we could be $100 billion. And then you hear Anthony Pratt at the Global Food Forum last year say, well, yeah, I agree, but not by 2030. What about by 2023? So you've got visionaries that are saying if we want to be relevant, we have to move faster. If we want to do that, we have to embrace new technology. And that's the short answer of what our future looks like. More tech and faster. We brought people together when we did this research. We talked to representatives of the entire ecosystem to help understand the challenge, understand the perspective through their lens. And one of the key takeouts was the complexity of the Australian ecosystem. We have just over 40 universities. We have 8 state and federal departments focused on agriculture. We have CSIRO sitting over there in that sort of government-controlled or funded and spruiked research capability. We have our industry ecosystem from growers, from processors and distributors and sellers. And sort of linking us all up are these 15 RDCs. And the takeout was researchers want to do research. They are scientists that are doing fantastic work, motivated by their own capability and talent and focus areas of discipline. And we've got industry that needs that science but wants to inform it. And the conversation is muddled. We've got discussions going on around how can I access research funding from industry, and industry going, but hang on, just listen to me. I want to talk to you about the type of science that I want you to focus on. I need you to shift from thinking about application science to solution science. So there's this discussion, this discourse going on that has a tension in it. We looked at 5 markets to really work out, well, if this is what we're faced with, is there a solution elsewhere? And it's really interesting when you look at these statistics. You see that Australia stands out on the Global Entrepreneurship Index, which is the top row, and also on the bottom row, which is the number of researchers per 1,000 people employed. However, when you dig a little bit deeper, you see that we don't fare so well when it comes to the level of transfer of knowledge from the science and research community into industry. That relationship, that connection is not where we need to be globally competitive, all right? And I think this slide really demonstrates it. For me, this was the sobering statistic that came out of the OECD analysis in 2013, looking at science, technology, and innovation, and the level of collaboration between firms and research centres. And there we are, way out at the wrong end of the slide. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to move all the way to be number 1. That's quite a pivot, but we've got to be somewhere closer to the middle. And to do that, we need to really work out how do we bridge the connection? How do we integrate more between the research fraternity and industry? What can we do around that? We came up with 12 recommendations from that report, and there's 3 really relevant ones, I think, that are applicable to this discussion today around research. 3 themes: direction, capital, and connection. And under direction, we talked about the need to really focus the KPIs of our research fraternity around commercialisation and adoption. Think about the grant periods. How can we shorten those? How can we create a bit more speed and urgency where things happen faster for us? That's not to say that Horizon 2, Horizon 3 science is not required. It absolutely is. We just need a stronger balance between H1 science and H2 and H3. Increasing the funding for the acceleration of commercialisation in the Entrepreneurs Program. We've got nearly 500 million put aside by the Ministry for Industry, Science and Innovation. We need to have more going into the focus around the commercialisation aspects of working with entrepreneurs. And the third one is this sort of utopia dream where we have a marketplace where farmers can talk about ag tech that works, farmers can talk about ag tech that doesn't work, farmers can talk about the problems they're facing that they don't have solutions for, and the research community can pull around that and see where the problems are that we can work on together. And really importantly, see where the gaps are and link that to, if you like, an online portal that talks about the research focus that's going on across these 40 universities, these 15 RDCs and these 8 state departments. So we don't have as much duplication. We need to be clearer about where effort's going and getting people working together. So, as I mentioned, our current ecosystem looks a bit more like this. And the problem we need to solve for is closing the loop, bringing industry more close to the decision-making that goes on in the research centres. Now, to do that, there are some good moves afoot. We are seeing some initiatives such as the Food Agility CRC. We're seeing initiatives such as government really thinking differently around how funding is allocated to research and how universities particularly are measured for performance. The year ahead is going to be the first year that we bring impact assessment into the way we assess the effect of universities' research performance. So you would have heard the old statement of publish or perish. We're trying to really pivot that more towards actually, it's less about the publication and more about the adoption of the science. So how much of it actually left the lab and got put into practice. Food agility. So I must disclose that we liked this so much we thought we should put our money where our mouth is and invest in food agility. So KPMG is a founding partner along with Bosch and NAB and a number of other institutions in the private sector that felt like we needed to step a bit closer to working with our research fraternity and really try and help build that bridge. The whole intention of this Food Agility CRC is to create an environment where the research fraternity does connect with industry, but not just at the large end of town, all the way through to startups and growers at the smaller end of the spectrum. So it's a collection of 54 partners, as you can see there, 5 state governments. But the really interesting thing is, for the first time, we're also bringing these technology partners. And when you think about the food agility and the principles that the Food Agility CRC is going to work with, these 5 here, being better together, it's about actually starting with a joined up mindset around how do you solve for a problem. It's putting that ecosystem together around the issues of today. Rather than science happening in isolation, it's about science happening in partnership. Second principle is we put the farmers first. All of the problems that come through the food agility to find a solution need to start with a market-driven need. So there's validation processes to confirm what the farmers and growers want the focus of that research, that technology to be deployed against. And we want to really address, in that third principle, the concept of data tombs, where we have all this information locked up in these universities and research centres because legally they collected that data for a reason and it can't be used for other things. And that's great from a privacy point of view, but it does hold the industry back. So we want to really change the model and ensure that growers realise that if you are sharing data with the CRC, then that data might be used for better research in parallel industries. So something that works for wine could be deployed into the dairy sector, for example. We want to get this triple helix effect of where it's not just the industry participant that's benefiting, but the regulator also gets to benefit from the data, and the research fraternity also gets access as well. We want a situation where science is really truly more agile, where we work on research. It's not just peer-reviewed by fellow scientists in that wider university and research centre ecosystem, but it's market-reviewed science. It's science that's tested real-time by the industry players. And lastly, we want this agile sprint innovation to apply when we run a project through Food Agility CRC. It's about shortening the cycle. It's about looking for those transfer points. It's about working out what hasn't worked in one place and trying to find a solution from another project. So I just wanted to touch on Food Agility CRC and then share with you some insights from one of the markets that we visited in November and December last year. So we looked at 5 markets in that Powering Growth report. Israel was one of those that really stood out for us on a number of fronts. It has the highest number of startups per capita in the world, the highest number of biotech startups per capita in the world. It is number 2 on the Global Entrepreneurship and Innovation Index, and we kind of wanted to know why. So we popped across there on the first ever Ag and Food Tech Trade Mission, led by Peter Schutz, chairman of FIAL, and attended by a number of industry participants, including John Lloyd from Horticulture Innovation Australia. This particular image is taken at one of the wineries that's run by the Professor of Plant Science from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, a very clever man called Oded Shozyov. Oded is coming out here in July. If you get the chance, listen to this person speak. We're standing at Oded's winery, where he's talking about some quite contemporary ways of stressing the vine to produce better grape yields and get a better vintage on a year after year basis. And that was interesting. The wine was great, but then he started talking about the 9 companies that he's founded, whilst being a professor and leading a whole faculty at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And the one that really almost made us spit our wine out was when he talked about this business that he founded called Coal Plant. Now, there's 2 interesting parts to this story: how much he sells that product for and how it came to be. So I'll start with how it came to be. Having had 9 businesses and exited 6, he's clearly an established entrepreneur. He's approached all the time by people with capital that want to work with him as a science founder, and that is what he is in these businesses. And he tells the story of this one guy who came back consistently over the space of 2 or 3 weeks and said, "I want to do my next project with you. You must have something. What's next, Oded? What's next?" And he just kept sending him away. And he was so persistent, he came back and said, "Well, look, I've been thinking about this idea. It's a little bit left of field, but And overnight, he had written on an A4 sheet of paper this concept. And the concept was to use transgenic tobacco plants infused with 5 human genes to grow collagen for medical use. And they spent 6 months proving up that concept, and the seed funding from this VC guy was used for that. 6 months later, CollPlant is born, and that business is now the first provider in the world to bring virgin collagen. The other sources are from Godivas, dead cows and dead pigs. So at best you're getting second-hand collagen when you're in for a medical treatment, to first-hand collagen produced in these tobacco plants. It sells for $1 million a kilogram. Wouldn't you like that? And we're all sort of sitting there trying to collect ourselves after hearing that and say, well, why can't we do that sort of science in Australia? Answer is, it's illegal to grow tobacco plants. It's like, well, we really have to challenge ourselves. We need science to help us really push the boundaries. So I just wanted to share that insight with you. There were many others, and in this sector, I think another one that was really interesting was a business called Eden Shield. So at the moment, the agri-chem pesticide market is around about $14 billion per annum globally. And the biological pesticide market is growing at close to 10 to 15% per annum. And Eden Shield is all about tricking the pests at the door. So if you've got a hothouse, you have almost an aromatherapy curtain that sends out a smell of a different crop varietal, so it confuses the insect. They don't want to come in. They also have a product which you can spray over the foliage so that when the insect actually lands, it tastes something different and it thinks, this is not my diet. I'm not going to touch this. So it's novel things like that, through to a plastic wrapping business for food wrap, which will ultimately pass out into the sort of Glad Wrap cling film, to snap lock bags, to chips and snack foods. That is 100% biodegradable. It breaks down in this time of 24 weeks. So globally addressable markets where the product is built around science, and that science comes because entrepreneurs can open the door and go to the university and say, I have an idea, I just need the right science behind me. I need my scientific founder. And when we came back, we said, that's what we need to have more of in Australia. We need this spirit of a collaboration between industry, between entrepreneurs, and between university professors. We need people to be able to do great science, stay in those institutions, and really connect with a commercialization and extension arm that business is. So we wrote a paper on those recommendations. If you're interested in reading that, Google Dial Up the Chutzpah, and let's have a look at how we can be a bit braver around how we speed up science in our food industry in Australia. Look, the last thing I just wanted to leave you with on the horizon, as you think about what you're hearing here at this conference, some things to lean into, some things as early adopters to take on and champion. Get involved in the food agility. Think about problems that your part of the sector faces and send them through. Send them through to me, send them through to the Food Agility website. The team is ready to receive the projects, the challenges that are going to take us to a $100 billion industry. Be part of the dialogue when the RDCs say, how do we create the next $1 billion industry? What does it look like? How are we going to compete with these alternative proteins? With Danone investing in Whitewave, this is one of the world's largest dairy companies, has bought a plant-based milk producer for $10 billion. That business in its own right is a third of the size of Fonterra. The disruption is coming so quickly. Get involved in it. Challenge your RDCs. Use your network. Talk about how you want to be part of the next wave of science. I take my hat off to the Horticulture Innovation Australia team. They're really changing the language around co-investment. If you see the John Deere tractor in the video screen and have a look at some of those co-investment pools, collaboration is an old word. There was no risk involved in it. You'd put people together and they'd lose interest. You don't lose interest when it's built around co-investment. If you have skin in the game, you get stuff done. So we've got to do more of that, and that's why you're seeing businesses like Bosch and NAB and KPMG and others want to play closer to the farm gate in this space, play with the researchers, and I think we need to see a faster transfer of science and take-up of it. And lastly, and this is something I'm really excited about, we have world-class science in Australia, and whether that be inside some of the universities or inside some of the state departments, but that's coming to market. There's a real appetite to open the cupboard doors, to harvest that great public science, commercialise it, and get it to market in Australia and beyond. And I just imagine an environment where you're not a levy payer, but you're a dividend receiver. Imagine if the research is so effective that we're earning global dividends and royalty streams off it, that our RDCs are actually writing checks back to industry. I mean, we could do that because we've got terrific science here. We just have to think about how we make that science reach the market and at the right value point. So I think it's an exciting future, and I think it's the right time for us to be looking over the horizon, Toby, at what's coming our way.
Very, very, very exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Ben. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Honestly, when and look, I'm going to have a very quick chat with you because I have a feeling that we're going to be so short on time, we're not going to be able to do a proper panel for this segment. The fact that you can be a dividend receiver, we see that happening. The CSIRO, as an example, in Australia has patents on a lot of stuff. Yep. And what you're saying is that there's enough smarts amongst the people in this room, represented by the people in this room and the research organisations that go along with it, to be able to start creating things that have patents that are applicable worldwide. So,
correct.
Why don't we?
Look, I think it's about shifting our mindset. We've come from an environment where it's co-funded. It's the growers and government coming together to either improve yield or overcome biosecurity challenges. And we've thought about our business as it stands as a grower, as a producer in Australia. But that same science is relevant in all the temperate climatic zones that we live in, right? And we have that natural advantage.
So what we're actually saying is that we're very insular in our thinking, and all we have to do is remember there are other parts of the world that are similar to us and go, globalisation's pretty easy nowadays. It's a bit of a click and somebody over there receives it, and that's just a change in thought process.
Yeah, it's shifting the thinking from solving the problem for Australia to actually thinking about global addressable markets.
Because it might be that much difference between Australia and everybody else,
yep.
And it's worth doing it right from the start. Look, it scares me that it takes 15,000 litres of water to raise 1 kilo of beef. That's good for this industry. We should get everybody eating more vegetables. It's simple as that. Yep. And I'd love to know what the Scandinavian and the Northwestern European countries are doing to have so much of that investment and collaboration happening skewed to the left,
yep.
And Australia's right down with Mexico at the other end.
Yeah.
Be interesting to be able to analyse why Finland and all the countries that seem to surround them think differently to us.
Yeah, I think that's a whole other conversation, and tax is a big part of it. So yeah. Already feels like we're in a high-tax market, but it's part of it.
Well, ScoMo might want to listen to us somewhere along the line. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in thanking Ben van Delden?
Thanks,
Thank
Toby.
you very much.